The day after being found guilty of all 34 felony counts against him, former U.S. President Donald Trump railed against the verdict at a news conference just a few moments ago. The presumptive Republican presidential nominee doubled down on many of his previous claims and called the New York jury's verdict unfair.
It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it.
Okay, folks, so the former president did speak for about 33 minutes. Now, some of it was about the trial, was about the verdict, was definitely about the judge. But then there were a lot of other issues that President Trump brought up about immigration and taxation and making America great again, which has essentially been the story of this trial, separating the political from the legal, or in some cases, illegal. And that is where the interweaving of these stories has made things complicated for people trying to decipher fact from fiction. So he has been off the campaign trail since this trial has been going on, but he has vowed to keep going. He is still the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party, and he says much of what he's had to deal with, especially in this trial, has been as a result of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party coming after him. So for most people, this would be a demonstration of fiction from the former president, but he does have supporters who are standing by him, even though he has now been found guilty on 34 felony counts. So a lot to still dive into and try to understand. Hopefully our friend CBC's Richard Madden, who's joining us live from Washington, can help us do that. Richard,
I am here.
I'm so glad you are, Richard. So
Bit of technical issues there, but yeah, all good now.
Hey, man, this live TV, we have fun.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Trump, who, I was saying to Katie earlier, particularly in that last speech that we saw in this past hour, he seemed so angry, so defiant. Even when he's in a bad mood, there's a playfulness with Trump. It didn't seem there. It seemed like this has really gotten to him. Give us your sense of what is happening now.
Well, in this instance, we heard the former president cranking out his greatest hits. He attacked the judge, he attacked the case, he attacked his former fixer, who was a star witness, Michael Cohen, and he insists he did absolutely nothing wrong. He mocked the term hush money, saying it was perfectly legal. NDAs are legal. And he did say he's going to appeal this ruling, but ultimately he will soon have the label convicted felon behind his name after he's sentenced. So clearly, that's nothing anyone would be happy about. But at the same time, you heard his loyal supporters in the background clapping when he talked about how much money he raised as a fundraising plea shortly after that guilty verdict came down. So we have heard from former President Donald Trump, and we may hear a response from President Joe Biden later today because he has several public events on his schedule. We haven't heard him specifically weigh in to this case against the former president. So Biden may choose to weigh in whether it's his own accord or if he answers reporters' shouted question. But as we've been saying all morning, this conviction really fits into Trump's campaign strategy of grievance and revenge throughout this. And even in his last press conference, he painted himself a victim as a rigged electoral system and now an unfair justice system. And he's been helped by conservative media here in the U.S. who've helped his cause, cranking up the outrage and really linking this to the Biden White House, accusing the White House of weaponizing the Department of Justice. And we've also seen some loyal Republicans rallying to Trump's defense, including his potential vice presidential pick, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and Texas Senator John Cornyn, who's eyeing a leadership role in the Senate and could use Trump's endorsement. Take a listen to what Senator Cornyn had to say.
I just think this is a miscarriage of justice, and I believe it will be reversed on appeal. Unfortunately, once you start down this path, it sets a precedent that's going to be repeated, and I think that's to the detriment of the nation and to our justice system.
And we've just seen a whole litany of other Republicans backing the former president. But not all Republicans have fallen in line. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, who's no fan of Trump, posted this warning shot, saying, and I'm quoting here, "The verdict is a fire bell in the night. The Republican Party now has one last chance to change course and not nominate a convicted felon for president." He then expanded on his warnings earlier today. Take a listen.
The fact is you've had 12 jurors find him guilty. And that is going to reverberate with a lot of Americans who are not part of the Trump base. And it could endanger not only the country if Trump gets elected, it could endanger other Republicans on the ballot in November.
So endanger other Republicans down the ballot in November, which of course may explain why the distancing from Republican Larry Hogan. Now, he's the former governor of Maryland who's now running for Senate. He's one of the Republicans' best hope to flip that deep blue state to win them control of the Senate. And he writes, and I'm quoting here, "Regardless of the result, I urge all Americans to respect the verdict and the legal process. At this dangerously divided moment in our history, all leaders, regardless of party, must not pour fuel on the fire with more toxic partisanship. We must reaffirm what has made this nation great, the rule of law." Now, on the other side of the aisle, Democrats are now calling Trump a convicted felon, painting him as extreme, corrupt, and a threat to the nation. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign posted this statement saying, and I'm quoting here, "Donald Trump has always mistakenly believed he would never face consequences for breaking the law for his own personal gain, but today's verdict does not change the fact that the American people face a simple reality. There is still only one way to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office, at the ballot box. Convicted felon or not, Trump will be the Republican nominee for president." Now, it's worth noting so far, top administration's officials have steered clear from making any public statements, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who dodged a direct question earlier this morning. Listen to this.
What are you hearing from foreign counterparts about the guilty verdict in the Trump trial?
I really have nothing to share on that. We have diplomatic conversations that will remain just that, diplomatic conversations in private.
So one would think on the surface, attacking Trump would be a home run for Democrats or critics. But this low-key silence from Democrats suggests they're being careful not to focus too much on the conviction, but rather build a sharper contrast between these two presidential contenders.
You know, Richard, before we jumped on with our conversation, I was saying it's so difficult to differentiate the political from the legal in this case. And again, the messages that we're getting from these various politicians demonstrates that what they say on a legal matter is in fact a political statement. And all of this sets the stage for the November election. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the legal calendar is obviously very clear. It's the politics that gets a bit murky here. But if there's one thing that both President Biden and former President Trump share, one thing in common is that they're both fundraising off this conviction. In fact, we heard Trump say that his campaign hauled some, $39 million after the conviction from low-money donors. So Trump is banking that this conviction will energize his base and create a voter backlash against the establishment that will carry him through the finish line in November. But how this shakes up November's election remains an open question because this is unprecedented. And how this will impact moderate and suburban voters, how they'll respond. Will they rally behind Trump or will they move away from him? Now, we'll know that answer in about 5 short months from now, but clearly we're all hearing that this election will come down to the wire with just a handful of swing states, just thousands of voters separating who wins and who loses. So this conviction really has really upended this political campaign and changed so many people's calculations.
CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks so much, Richard.
You bet.